Every single person should read this book. It will change the way you look at life itself, not just work, not just, what it is that you're working on, but just your entire life and your mindset. You see things with so much more clarity. Hi y'all, this is Kalina from Eat, Read, Sleep, and I'm here today with my lovely co-host Tapas.
Hey guys, welcome back. Today we have an amazing book for you guys.
Yes.
The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. One of my favorite leadership / all around books that I've read in quite some time. And I think we're going to have a great discussion today. So I can't wait for this.
I couldn't agree more. I think I'm going to start every podcast. I think I have started every podcast with, I love this book. I absolutely love this book.
Yes.
It's just amazing. So if you haven't read it, feel free to check out our book summary. We've got a quick brief on it, walks through everything. If you have read it, thanks for joining us today to discuss the book.
So before we dive deep into the book, let's go through a quick brief summary of the book.
What is this book about?
Exactly. Yeah. And then we'll go into the more details that we really want to get into. So
sounds good.
All right, so I'll let you start off with the finite versus infinite mindset.
Okay, so the infinite game, what is that all about?
Yes.
So Simon Sinek starts off with this book with finite versus infinite. So it's two mindsets of how you look at something. One is a finite way. An example that he gives in the book is football. Football is a game that is finite because there is a beginning, middle, and end. You know who the players are, you know what the rules are, versus something that's an infinite game. An infinite game is something that's like a marriage or friendship where there is no beginning, middle, or end necessarily. There are no set rules, and you're not really playing to win. You're really just playing to sustain and grow over time. That's how he breaks down the infinite games, and then he goes through the premise of the book really is if you want to have an infinite mindset, he walks through how to do all of that.
So the 5 infinite mindsets that Simon talks about in the game, in the book, is around advance a just cause, build trusting teams, study your worthy rivals. 4 is prepare for existential flexibility. 5th one is demonstrate courage to lead. We go into this a lot more during the summaries, but we just want to highlight it for you guys what the book's about. And then now let's get into the meat of it.
Yeah, let's talk about it. I've been waiting to talk about this book with you.
Yes. Let's go back to, first and foremost, why did Simon write? Because
great question.
As you guys read it, the concept is a little, I would say, non-traditional.
It's big. It's a big concept.
In the world we live in now, it's not necessarily a concept that most companies have adopted, but some are. So why did Simon come to write this book?
So you guys, this morning, I sent Tapas a podcast recommendation. Simon Sinek has a podcast, A Bit of Optimism, and he did a segment with a philosopher. His name is Professor Carse, and Carse actually was the originator of the finite versus infinite game / mindset. He wrote this book many, many years ago. Simon Sinek stumbled upon it and was like, this is amazing. He expanded on that. This podcast, you guys, I actually listened to before reading the book, and it made so much sense to me.
Yes.
And then when I actually read the book, I was like, wow, I understand what Simon Sinek is saying. This is life-changing. This is actually world-changing if we allow it to be. If we all understood what we're playing every day, whether or not we're in an infinite game or a finite game, we all would be so much more successful and happy and living life the way it's meant to be lived. But you mentioned it earlier, you said the word business, right?
Yes.
Because I think that's a lot of what the book goes over as well. Because earlier when I said what is an infinite game, business, work, job, all of that is an infinite game. But what is the problem?
Well, everyone is looking at numbers, metrics, top line, bottom line, all that kind of stuff. And those are all finite mindsets where we're just saying, okay, we are going to be the best of the best. We're going to make the most amount of profit. We're going to do X, Y, and Z to get the profit. And that's when a lot of companies will say, yeah, we're the best company in the world in terms of this. And that's where a lot of people lose that mindset of infinite mindset.
So one example that he started in the beginning of the book that I thought was very powerful was when he talked about the Vietnam War.
Yes.
Did you see that?
Yeah.
When he was talking about that, he mentions that in the Vietnam War, there were many battles throughout the year. And the U.S. actually won a majority of all of the battles. And so the question came to be, how did we win all the battles but end up losing the war? And he goes through to explain the U.S. was playing a war of a finite mindset, whereas Vietnam they had the infinite mindset. They weren't playing to win or lose. They were trying to just survive. And this is something that they've gone through for centuries, with China. This wasn't just a one battle, one war for them to fight and lose or win. It was a long game for them, and it meant something for them. So for me, that was just very powerful, because that was when it clicked for me. If you're playing with the right mindset in the right game, that's how you succeed. It's what it's meant to be. But if you're playing an infinite game with a finite mindset, that's what he calls one of the chapters. That's what is detriment.
And I think a lot of companies also go struggle with this a lot, is because if you look at their slogans and what they stand for, and what we'll talk about in a little bit, their just cause, it's all around best of the best. And I think number one and number one provider in this, number one in that. And the companies that tend to stick around the longest are the ones that have the infinite mindset, where they're just saying, we're getting to this arbitrary point. We want to get to this. We may never get there, but we're striving towards that, right? So same with the Vietnam War. The Vietnamese were fighting for something way bigger than just trying to get U.S. out of the country. They were fighting for something much higher. And I think, again, we don't condone wars and all that kind of stuff, but that's the kind of mindset that they were in. And that's why when the U.S. came back as, oh my God, that was just such a mess for us. So
we lost lives, we lost money, we lost time, all of that because we weren't in the right mindset. Business, infinite game. Why do so many of us run business with a finite mindset? That's the big question, right? That's the biggest problem, and that's the huge walkthrough of this book. And obviously there are many infinite relationships, like I mentioned, marriage, friendships, things like that, education, careers, all of those are infinite things, but the main focus of this book is business. So, and that's definitely something that we can relate to in the corporate world that we work in. We see a lot of this finite mindset in an infinite world. So let's kind of talk through that.
And again, I love what Simon says in some of the books. You can't win marriage. Right, you can't win friendships.
Sometimes,
you can't be that way, right? It's just not possible, right? And same with business, you cannot win at business. The example that Simon gives in the book is around Microsoft versus Apple. He talked about, and if you guys watch a lot of podcasts, he brings up this story a lot. Is around where he goes to the Apple's convention, and they're talking about revolutionizing, schools and
teachers
the day-to-day.
And learning.
They want to make the iPod this accessible for all these people, right? They're not concerned about their competition. They're just more about like, let's just try to get our imprint in everyone's lives, and let's try to make this world a better place. That's Apple's mindset. And then he goes to the Microsoft mindset, and he said about what is it, 80%, 90%, the entire conference around, this is why we're going to beat Apple at this. We're going to beat Apple at that. And they're just their finite mindset was just wrapped around, let's just beat Apple. Obviously, you guys know now who is a true winner of that. Apple is still striving strong. Microsoft is very, very successful, but they're not quite where Apple is. So that's the difference in mindset.
He ended that story with a little segment that was so powerful. He said he was sitting in the cab with the Apple employee, and he was trying to stir the pot a little. And he's like, hey, I was speaking at Microsoft, and they gave me their Zune, and it's so much better than the iPod.
Fun fact, okay. I actually bought Zune. I have it in my office. I'll show you guys a video of it. I actually bought that Zune because I was so anti-Apple.
So he's trying to stir the pot, and the Apple employee just looks at him. Simon says, their product's better than yours. And the guy just says, I have no doubt. And that was the end.
Yeah.
Like, that to me was so powerful, because if you care more about your just cause and what you're doing, you don't care whether or not you are number one, or if you're beating someone else. You're just trying to beat yourself. You're just trying to advance and do what's right, and you're not focused on all the trivial and everything else. And I was just like, wow, that's power right there. Simon Sinek says, in order to have an infinite mindset, there's 5 practices, 5 standards that you have to have. And you cannot have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. You have to have all 5 of them. If you miss one, you will immediately slip back to the infinite mindset. So the very first one is the just cause. And I actually really appreciate this because, part of my own personal self-development a few years back was when I actually identified what my personal mission statement. And this is very similar in a way. And once I found out what my mission statement was, my life became so clear. It was just so simple to say, does this align with my personal mission? Yes, no. If it's yes, perfect. If it's no, I don't have to worry about it. I'm just going to let it go, not stress about it, and keep on moving forward. And that's what the just cause is, but to an elevated level.
The difference between a why and a just cause, right? So the why is something more past tense, your past experiences that you've had, and that's where the why comes from. And then just cause, something that you're looking for is in the future.
The just cause is an overall this big vision of how you want to change the world, essentially. So I do want to share with all of our listeners and viewers today what Eat, Read, Sleep is all about.
Yes.
I think it's really important for you guys to understand why we're even here doing this today. We have actually written this down. Simon Sinek says that once you've figured out what your just cause is, you do need to write it down so that it is sustainable and can be passed on. But even before we read this book, Eat, Read, Sleep did sit down and we said, why are we doing this? So to share with you guys, our why is really to create a community of like-minded, curious and courageous readers living the path to self-discovery and to inspire others to do the same. That is the whole purpose as to why we're here. We come here to do this and we have that vision in mind, and we're just so happy and honored to have you guys here today because we want to help inspire you, and then in turn you go and help others be inspired as well. Really funny. I had someone mention to me recently, because you know how we put up on our Instagram stories like, oh yeah, we got 100 followers. I had someone reach out to me and say, why don't you just buy bots? Like 100 is nothing. Like you can get so many more followers. And my first thought was, because that does not align with my why. I'm not doing this to get fake numbers. I'm doing this because I genuinely, if we have just one person that says, hey, what you're doing actually helps me think through, be a good leader, or how to improve and wake up every day happy and feel inspired and figure out how to find that path to happiness. That's all I want, right? So it's that organic growth that we're super happy about versus trying to think about strategies and all of that.
And shout out to all of our consistent listeners. I know
thank you guys.
We've been getting a lot of comments, and a lot of people are reaching out to us directly and saying, hey, you guys are amazing for a morning drive. I listen to you guys at work. Like, it's so amazing to hear you guys give that feedback.
It's really helpful. So if you are on this path as a true Eat, Read, Sleep community where you're reading with us every week, please let us know. We'd love to hear from you guys. And then if there's anything that we could do better, we'll definitely work on ourselves for you. So let's leave that into so we have our why. What's our just cause, T?
All right. To build a world in which people feel free to live in the moment, free to be their authentic self, and genuinely exude happiness and love for what they have in life, right?
So we want a world.
Right.
And there's when I read that, I feel so good because there's three main takeaway. We're trying to create a world where people can live in the moment without guilt, right? Like how much, at least for me, like when I'm happy or whatever, I feel guilty. I'm like, oh my gosh, I should be doing this or I should be doing that. Being 100% free and in the moment, happy, being your authentic self. That for me is still a journey that I'm working on, trying to be someone who what I think other people need or other people want, or trying to seek approval, like just being your authentic self, who you are. And then the last one is just to be happy, like just find happiness in what you have, what's been given to you, what you can make of your situation.
I know, and I love that because, there's nothing saying that we're going to be the best podcasters in the world. We're not going to be, this is what we're striving towards. And it is a goal that we may never reach, but we're something that we're striving towards, that we can help clear our path. Love to see it, and I think we guys definitely recommend you guys also share your just cause, because you don't have to necessarily be a business person, and then you can have your own just cause that you live by in your life. Write it down if you can think of it, and even if it's the first thing you think of, write it down. That's perfectly fine. It's something that you can build upon over time, but it's a really important thing to write. And
if a just cause feels too extreme, then just have a personal mission statement, something that's just for you or your why. And again, writing it down makes a big difference.
So for just cause, it must be 5 things that's important for just cause. And as you guys are thinking it through, first is it must be for something. It must be inclusive, must be service oriented, resilient, and idealistic. So for something is affirmative and optimistic. And then for inclusive, it is open to all who would like to contribute. So again,
can we go back to the for something real quick? I do just want to point out it's for something versus being against something, right? So an example would be, instead of saying that you are against poverty, right? That sounds positive, right? But you're actually against something for something positive. He says that we should look at it a little bit differently. Instead of I'm against poverty, it's I am for families being able to provide for their community or whatnot. So it should always be positive and for versus against something negative.
Inclusive, so open to all those who like to contribute. So this is very important as you guys are trying to build a team. If you're in a business, especially, having a optimistic, inclusive environment helps build that, because then your colleagues and coworkers, they all know what they need to strive towards.
Yeah.
If they don't feel included in that entire just cause, they're just gonna be like, well, I'm just here to collect my check. I'm going to clock in and out, and that's it. That's where a lot of the engagement
He
comes
says
from.
that humans innately want to belong to something, right?
Yes.
So when you share a common just cause or a common purpose as to what you're doing, it unites you together and creates a stronger bond.
The third one is service oriented, so it's the primary benefit of others.
And I think it's important to point out that the service oriented has to be the primary goal, right? Because you do hear these visions and just cause from companies where they're like, our just cause is to make money for our shareholders, create great products, and have these products available to all of our people so people can use them. But they put people last.
Right.
It's not the service that they're after. It's to make money for their stakeholders.
A fourth one for this is resilient, so able to endure political, technological, and cultural change. So again, building a vision that will go through, we have a lot of popular companies like Kodak, for example, where they didn't want to go into the digital camera role, so they refused to change their ideas. The technology part completely passed them by.
Yeah.
And so they no longer became they're not quite as relevant as they were before.
So a good way to frame that up, I would say, is for Kodak, their initial mission was to be able to create or make photography available for the masses.
Right.
So if they had kind of stuck to that versus being stuck to the product of a film camera, then they would have succeeded. But they were so stuck on the top line, all the money that they were making from that camera, versus saying my overall mission was to have photography be available for everyone. So staying on course with what your just cause also helps you be profitable as well as a byproduct.
And last one is being idealistic. So big, bold, and ultimately unachievable. That's something that I like to highlight the most, because you want to create a just cause that is so a little out there. Do whatever you can to get towards that goal, and you may not eventually reach it.
I think when I read this, at first I was like, does that sound right? Like, it almost makes it sound like you're going to make something impossible as your goal, and that's almost where you can lose a lot of hope and not get a lot of buy-in when you say something that's it's just so big. But the concept is more of making it ultimately unachievable, because it makes you want to continually strive better and continually do a little bit more. It's not that once you get there, you're like, okay, I'm good. Once you get there, you say, how can I now even be even better and do more and more and more each time?
One of the cool examples that he gives for just cause in the book is around the founding fathers. Their just cause is they fought for life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. To this day, that's something that we are still striving towards. They never solved it. Yeah. It's still there, and we've gone through revolutions. We've gone through a lot of changes in the last few years since they wrote that statement, but it's something that the country still strives towards, right? So I love that he mentioned, because that is something that we can always look at as a good example of like what a just cause is.
Okay, so that's how to write a just cause.
Yes.
And remember, just make sure you write it down. Don't keep it a secret. Share it, because the whole purpose is to get everyone on that path with you and making that difference in the world. Yep. So let's get to the second way to make sure you have an infinite mindset. This is probably one of my favorite ones, and it's to build a trusting team. So why is it important to have a trusting team, right? So if we go back to the business, as is the main bulk of his book, you and I work in a company, in a corporation, where I think we can be honest and say we have seen groups of people who work together versus people who work in a trusting team. Is that safe to assume?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
So
agreed.
have you experienced the difference between the two?
People who work together oftentimes are placed there not by choice, and sometimes they don't share the same vision.
Yeah.
I think trusting teams, you feel more empowered to give your opinion. You feel like you are listened to. You are appreciated, and in the end, you also follow the same vision as what the plan is, right? So a lot of times, I think that's what I've noticed in my career, is that I'll be placed on teams where I'm like, yes, this is amazing, let's do this, and you see the excitement around everybody else. Yeah. And then there are other teams where I'm just like, people just say, well, this is due by tomorrow, by end of day, guys, so let's just
do
work
it.
on it. Let's do it. And then you can tell there's no excitement, there's no one single team thing, and I can say, hey guys, let's try to do this instead. No, it's due tomorrow, Tapas. We have no time for this.
Why don't we just have trusting teams?
I think for me it starts from the top. you want to create the environment, this culture in your company where you can feel like everybody is valued and everyone's opinions are taken for. And that kind of helps you feel comfortable in the team and a part of it. So a lot of times, again, if your just cause is to be best of the best and number one at this, you're not going to build a trusting team because you might just say, well, Tapas's idea is not going to get us number one, so I don't trust him.
And I think that goes back to leaders having finite mindset versus an infinite mindset. They're so focused on the metric or the goal or being number one that they don't even look at the progress or the teamwork or the trust that needs to be built first and foremost. So with that being said, an example in here that I really love is when Simon Sinek talks about how the U.S. Navy SEALs, the U.S. Navy recruits their SEALs. And there is a chart on there. They say every time they would prefer to have someone that they trust versus someone that performs well.
High performance, high trust, they want that person, of course. They have a low performance, high trust, they want that person. If you have a low performance, low trust, obviously you want that person on your team. And then lastly, if you have a high performance but no trust, they still don't want you. Which is amazing because the Navy SEALs are one of the most organized and the most sought after.
So coveted, right.
And leadership teams in the world.
Yeah.
And the fact that they would prefer to have someone that's a low performer but a high trust versus the opposite.
And I think that that is a lot of what our leadership needs to take a step back and look at and identify that at the core of it, you need to trust your team and your people first versus giving accolades and preference to someone that performs really well.
Right.
Just because they're number one doesn't mean that they are someone that you should have on your team. What does number one do? It gives you the pressure of potentially cheating, creating shortcuts, compromising your ethical code to get to number one. Because when you have that as your goal, you'll do anything to get there.
Companies that really disengage their colleagues and their workers around is when you recognize those people. It's like, hey, you had the best metrics of last year. And you're like, I know what this person really does.
Right.
And obviously, you're not going to go out and say, because again, you might not be in a trusted environment.
Correct.
As well. When you start to recognize those people, then people around them will just say, well, I have to do the same thing. And then you just create this culture.
Yes, that makes people go into self-preservation mode, right?
You're like, oh, I need to do that in order to get the recognition that this person's getting. So I'm going to change my leadership style. I'm going to change my approach. And you're not being authentic self.
Because you feel like that's the only way to win, right? A very common phrase that you hear a lot is fake it till you make it. And I hate that one so much. Why do you need to fake it till you make it, right? Because that goes against us. We're all about being your authentic self. This is just a norm that we see now and that people just say that's how you succeed. And one other thing about trusting teams, I love Simon Sinek gives a shout out to Brene Brown and calls out the book Dare to Lead, which we reviewed last week. If you guys didn't check that out, please do. Such an amazing book. I feel like, like I said again, every week I'm like, I love this book. But all the books that we've done so far has been huge and been very different, at least for us, right? The first one, Alchemist, that was really big for us because that's what led us on this journey on self-discovery and self-growth.
She just teased our next book. We're talking about Alchemist next.
Did I say Alchemist?
Yeah.
I meant the Four Agreements.
Yes. Well, Alchemist is also going to be a very, very cool book to do. But yes, Four Agreements first.
Four Agreements first. I'm already planning for next week. That's
you
why.
Put the teaser in there.
Four
already.
Agreements. And then what did we do? Atomic Habits. That was all about our habits and what we did. And then after that was Seven Habits. That was for me changing my process. And then Dare to Lead was changing my leadership. And now with this, the Infinite game, that's just changing my mindset, you guys. Like, this is huge. So I don't think we didn't mean it in that order, but at least for me, that was the perfect formula for me to get to where I am today and have.
So next one is find your worthy rival.
Ooh, what does that mean? Worthy rival. Sounds like an oxymoron.
So worthy rival is somebody. It could be a competitor, but you don't want to think of them as your enemy. As somebody that's going to make you better. Get them. You're like, there's something about this person or that company, or I want to be how they are. So that's how I think of worthy rivals are. They're people that you strive towards, not necessarily mentors per se, but somebody that you need to kind of gauge yourself to. Right?
So the definition of a worthy rival, he says, is it's another player in the game who is worthy of comparison to you.
Yes.
So just like you said, Tapas, it could be someone that is an enemy even. It could be a peer. It could be a collaborator. It could be your family members. It could be anyone that is good at something, and you look at them and you're like, hey, I can learn from this person.
And Simon has an example in the book around he had his own worthy rival where he looked at this author, Adam Grant, and he's saying that, man, this guy...
Shout out to Adam Grant.
Another amazing author.
Amazing.
And he always felt like, he's comparing himself to it. How are the book sales going? Is he number one? Is Adam number one? He kind of would go back and forth. And then
he even said, like, even just the name made him feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. And then they ended up having a conference together where they both were going to present. And then he actually told Adam, hey, Adam, this is what I have to be really honest with you. This is how I feel about you. And Adam says, well, funny enough, Simon, I feel the same about you,
wow.
which is amazing because they both are pushing each other to really drive that creativity and their own personal growth.
And the great part about this is you can push each other without having that animosity, right? We connect the word rival with, like you said, enemy almost, like someone that's you're competing against versus working with. And again, that's that mindset that we need to change because, so he says that with a rival, you have that attitude of winning, right? Versus if you have a worthy rival, then you take on an attitude of improvement. Yes. And I think so much in today, we look at a rival and it's just, we need to beat this person. We got to be better than them.
The worthy rivals can also help you get better at what you do and also can be clear on why we do it, right?
Yeah.
So it helps your own personal growth.
So let me call you out. Do you have a worthy rival? And you don't have to name this person, but do you?
I would say there was somebody in the past that I worked with. Initially, I was just like, damn, they're just so good.
But how did you feel? Did it make you not like them? Were you uncomfortable about it? Like,
I would say I did not like them initially, because I'm just like, wow, they're just good at everything. Like, what is like, I don't understand what their secret sauce is. Maybe they're cheating the system, whatever it is.
And it's such an innate reaction, right? Like
just like I don't think this is the right way. This person's not doing it the right way.
Yeah.
And then as I got to talk to them, I was like, wow, they're doing it the right way.
Yeah.
And I felt like, well, I need to change my leadership like this because I want to get to where they're at. And granted, they've had multiple years in this industry that we're in, and they've been doing it for a very long time. But I'm just like, well, I can get there. Push myself to get to that mindset, and then it just completely changed for me.
And I think that's the important thing to point out is even if you realize or you know that you need to have an infinite mindset in an infinite game, it's very easy to slip back to have a finite mindset. And even Simon Sinek says it happens to him as well, right? Like that's natural. That's just how we've been groomed for so long that it's what we're used to and comfortable with. Right. So as long as you recognize it and then you say, okay, how can I make the situation better? How can we both grow? How can we all have that win-win attitude? Then it starts to become easier. The more you practice it, the more you start having that mindset. I don't have a particular person, but I will share that as a mother, right, as a mom, I do see all of these other moms out there doing these amazing, great things with their kids, and they're working and they're never tired. I'm like, my goodness, I'm tired all the time. But I used to, what I would say is like whenever I'd see like a super mom, I'd just be like, okay, well, they probably have a lot of help or they probably have a lot of finances, or I would make up excuses for why that happens, right? Or maybe this is what I see on Instagram, but it's fake. It's not really real, right? So again, it's that quick to judge mindset. And now when I look at it, I'm trying to make them more of a worthy rival. And it's like, okay, well, can I do that? How do I actually get myself to be like that? And that's a great idea. And how can I incorporate it and using it more as a positive push versus belittling the impact that they could have on me?
Taking away the ego around it too, right?
I think that's exactly what it is. Yeah, so you're right.
You don't want to feel like, oh yeah, this person's, you're not belittling them. You're just thinking that, well, this person's doing it really well. Yeah. What can I learn from them?
Yeah. That's the natural self-preservation mode as well, right? Because if someone's better than you, then you automatically think that you're not good enough.
And let's get into existential flexibility.
Do we have to?
It's a really great concept.
I love the concept. I don't know why I can't say this word.
We'll just say EF.
Existential flexibility.
Check out the bloopers from the previous summary, guys. So that was a fun thing to do.
We were literally in tears crying because it was so sad that I cannot say this word.
Simon defines it as this is the capacity to start an extreme disruption to a business model in order to advance your cause further.
What does that mean?
So that means
that's a lot of words.
Being able to change your course, flex it out, right? Yep. You see the conditions that you're in. Maybe the company's not going where you need to be. you change the course altogether and go a completely different direction. And that's because you are still tied to your just cause and you're trying to meet it there.
I really like this. So in order to have existential flexibility, though, your company or what you're doing has to already be fully formed and functioning. And the most important part is playing offense. You're preparing. You're ready in, I was trying to think of a sports term, but I'm just not even going to pretend. You're just ready to attack the other side. And so once you're in almost like a proactive mode, right? So once you're ready to go, once that cue hits, you're like, okay, I'm ready to switch our strategies. No matter how much you're already invested in what you're currently doing, you feel good with that because it's aligning with what your just cause is. And then you just go towards that. Someone with a infinite mindset that has existential flexibility, Apple again. Apple was in the works of a program that they were doing, and they went to go tour the Xerox company, and Xerox had this program where it was bringing computers to the masses, right? Like instead of going in, the black dot screen of knowing all the codes. Now they have the capacity to, the capability of using a mouse and an arrow, and then anyone can use a computer. Had Apple just stayed with their cores, they had poured millions of dollars into what they were currently doing. We wouldn't have what Apple is today. But they literally just said, I see this. This is the future. We're going to do it. We don't care how much money we've already put in. Scrap it. Let's change and go forward because this aligns with our just cause. They threw away millions of dollars. And at that time, that's probably equated to billions of dollars today.
Another example that I loved, I think this one, it's actually two, but one of them that I really liked a lot is around Walt Disney. Essentially, he was the first person to have the stop motion animation, first cartoon in the world. And he did that after quitting his high paying job that he already had. He decided to pursue a complete different career. And it was, again, his just cause was, I want to create this sort of entertainment. I want to build out my vision. So he created it. And he had amazing success with it. Then he's like, something just doesn't feel right. I still don't feel fulfilled. My just cause is going to take me somewhere else. And then he quit all of that and opened up Disneyland.
Imagine what all the skeptics said.
Yeah, they're like, what? You're going to open up a theme park? He's like, well, I want people to have a vision. I want them to come here and feel like they are living in a Tomorrowland, all that kind of. He had this huge just cause vision that he wanted to portray. And so he changed his entire approach. And it takes a lot of guts to do that. And I think, and of
flexibility.
Course, and flexibility. And of course, Walt Disney, and you guys know Disney now, one of the most, aspirational,
he's been able
successful.
To bring that feeling of happiness that he wants to everyone, right? The second, for me, I walk not even into the park yet, just into the parking lot, and you hear the music. It just gives you these goosebumps. And that's Walt Disney living out the dream that his just cause that he set out to achieve. I love how all of these tie in together, right? You can't really, and he's right, you can't have one without the other and have that and still have an infinite mindset because they all tie into each other seamlessly.
And then last but not least, courage to lead.
This, again, reminds me of our last book with Brene Brown, Dare to Lead. So what's courage to lead?
It's the willingness to take risk for the good of an unknown future, how Simon says it in the book. So this could cost you your job. It could cost you a lot of money, but you have the courage to lead a different charge. And kind of going back to existential flexibility, being able to divert if you need to, or stand up for something that you really feel passionate because it goes back to your just cause.
Yep.
A really cool example from the book is the 2014 and CVS Caremark's decision to stop tobacco sales.
Amazing example. This one's powerful.
Out of left field thing for a company to do, right? They decided that they were going to stop all tobacco sales because their company motto is they want to help lead people on the path to better health, right? That's their just cause. That's what they stand for. And that's what they wanted to make sure that they portrayed to the entire community. So they completely stopped all tobacco sales. Everyone said, Wall Street was like, terrible decision. How could you do this? You're going to have so much money lost. They were expected to lose $2 billion per year in lost revenue. And obviously the market, their stock prices took a hit, all that stuff, but they said, we don't care. This is what we stand for. This is what we want to do. What happens? They said, people said, well, people will not come to CVS anymore for cigarettes, they'll go somewhere else. Well, in fact, most of the communities that the CVS stopped selling it to, people actually just stopped smoking.
They were actually so inspired, and the support for this step was so overwhelmingly positive. People actually started to take care of their health better. Yeah. What did they say? Their nicotine patch sales went up 4%, and then the amount of cigarette sales as an industry, actually decreased
95
million less packs of cigarettes sold over an 8-month time span. Impact that CVS had on people's health through that, absolutely amazing.
It was a very much a company decision where they just felt like that was not contributing to people's health, obviously, right? Cigarette smoking is not good. And they wanted to make sure they completely get rid of that.
They had no pressure to do this.
Exactly.
There was no reason for them to do this. They were making money. Everything was good. They just said, we're looking at how to be better. This follows our purpose and our just cause, and this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
How inspiring.
And financially, again, they saw a slight dip in their stock, but then went right back up again. Their market share continued to improve. And then their competitors, right? People looked at Walgreens and Rite Aid, their top two competitors, and they're like, are you guys going to do something about this as well? And they're like,
Nope.
No. Walgreens said, we're thinking about it. We'll eventually may or may not do it. We're not sure. Even though their just cause is very similar to CVS's as well. Rite Aid said, well, we're going to continue to do it because we're allowed to. Yeah, both of them, right? Both Walgreens and Rite Aid have taken a huge dip,
Yep.
And CVS's market share has gone.
So that's a great example of, as long as you stick to your just cause, you have the courage, you have the existential flexibility, the money, the finances, all of that becomes an organic byproduct of what you're doing versus the other way around, going after the money and then trying to get everything to work.
So I thought that was a very, very impactful example that he gave.
So I absolutely agree. But let's be real. That takes courage. And not a lot of people have courage or even know how to have courage. How do you get yourself to that position where you can do something like that?
Well, it could be being a very proactive company, right? So having the vision and looking at your just cause and saying, are we on the right path? Do we need to make a market disruption? Do we need to do something differently to get to there? And I think that's really important. And a lot of times it could also just be a spark.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So in the book, he says you can get courage two different ways, right? One, that spark. You wait for something dramatic to happen to you where you just... he says it shakes you to your core to the point where you just see the world differently. And then you, at that point, then will be courageous enough to stand up for what you believe in. Or the other way, the proactive way, following through your just cause and all of the things that we just talked about. One quote that Sinek says from this portion is, it takes no courage to have a finite mindset.
Yes.
And I thought that was just so powerful. It's so true.
Yeah.
You see it in leaders that have that finite mindset. They're not courageous. They're scared shitless.
Yep.
And they're just covering it up really well with their number ones and their numbers. And
for the infinite game to work, you have to make sure everyone around you is also playing a very similar game. A lot of times, the company that have stood the test of time are the infinite players, the Apples of the world. They've stood the test of time because their vision is so high. So we want to make sure that we continue to strive towards that goal.
All right. So what do you think of this book?
I personally love this book. I thought when I first read it, I was like, oh my God, I have been playing the Finite game all the time because I thought that's what I needed to do to be a successful leader. Is I got to meet my metrics, and whatever I do, I got to do it somehow.
Be the best.
And be the best. I'd be number one because that's what I see those people being recognized in my company. So I'm just like, I got to do A, B, and C. That's what my mindset was. And then when I read this, I was like, wow, because one thing that I love that Simon talked about is it's a lot around people. You're doing all this
Always
for
around people. Yeah.
people first. Put people first. And that's one thing that he consistently talks about, right?
Yeah.
Because you got to have people that will lead your vision, lead your just cause. And you have to build a community of people that will help you do it.
Yep.
I can't control how my company's just cause goes, but what I can control is how my team. So my just cause with my team is, hey guys, this A, B, and C is what I really stand for. I built my team.
You play
around
an
that.
infinite game with your team.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And at the end of the day, guys, it doesn't matter what our numbers
Has
look
that
like.
been a struggle?
It has. It takes, I've gotten into not so good conversation with my boss, but at the same time, I identify people in my team that are finite players.
Yes.
And I'm like, I don't think you would be the right fit for my infinite game because
Yeah.
I'm not playing that finite game. I'm not trying to be number one.
Yeah.
In anything, I'm trying to make sure we're making an impact. And that's all I really care about.
I asked that because I actually have seen that as well, right? When you go into an infinite game with an infinite mindset, you're ready to go, you're good. But then when you come across a player that's playing an infinite game with a finite mindset, it's disruptive, it's weird. And when you try to explain to a finite mindset, they just can't see it. Simon does mention in the book, and I agree, he talks a little bit about self-preservation mode and why and how people get there. And it's not necessarily their fault, right? People who have finite mindset, they got there because they feel like that's what they have to do, just like you and me, we said, right? But how do we help them see that there's another way to play? And that's why I absolutely love this book. I want this book to be made available to everyone as much as possible. So you guys, if you have already read this book, I'm also going to give you one more recommendation. It's that A Bit of Optimism podcast by Simon Sinek, and it's that segment he had with the philosopher Professor Carse, who came up with this concept of infinite versus finite mindset. Listening to that podcast blew my mind away. Was there anything from that podcast that you were just like, this is so important, that you may not have gotten from the book itself?
There was a part where he talks about infinite game, and this podcast took place in 2020, the pandemic. For me, that was huge because he talks about how the pandemic should help everyone realize what the infinite game is. I know you had a lot of takeaways from that as well.
I love this book, this podcast, even the way that it starts off, because Simon asked him, like, how did you even come about this? Tell me a little bit about more. And Carse tells us that he grew up with a finite mindset and family, and he says that he actually felt he didn't know any better, but looking back, he felt a bit uncomfortable. His family, his dad was a professional boxer, so he grew up in a very competitive environment. It wasn't a violent environment. It was a very active environment, and he had always felt a bit of unsettling discomfort. It wasn't until he went into academics when he got older and he started immersing himself in more of education, more of an infinite environment, that he started to feel a little more comfortable. And that to me was really important, because how many of us walk around work doing what we're doing feeling this discomfort, right? And it's because we're playing the wrong game. We don't know what we're doing, and it's almost like a gut feeling, but we can't pinpoint, like, what is wrong? Why does it feel this way? Why is it so negative? It's because you're not playing the right game.
Right.
And for me, like, that was such a big realization that, like, oh, there's so many of us playing this finite game in an infinite world, and we got to shift our mindset. That's not to say there's no such thing as finite games, right? Within an infinite game, there's also finite games. You just need to know what those moments are.
Unfortunately, a lot of people will fall into the finite game consistently, and they'll have that realization when they don't feel like they're being their true selves.
Yeah.
I know I had that feeling where I was, after I read this book, but also I came to the realization, I'm like, I don't like where I'm going, because this is just not me.
It doesn't feel right. It's a discomfort.
Yeah, like I don't like micromanaging. I don't like doing this, and this. And I'm just like, that's just not who I am.
Yeah.
And you can feel that there's something wrong. And then as you realize that it's my environment, I'm around finite mindseted people.
Yeah. And I am being finite.
Right.
So that I thought was really important. And what I thought was just so inspirational was at the end of this podcast, Simon's interviewing Professor Carse, and it's like his idol. At the end of it, Professor Carse says to Simon Sinek, well, thank you. I've been wanting someone to spread my message and make sure that this lives on. Thank you for carrying the torch. And for me, it was just so powerful, because any other person, or a person playing with a finite mind, would say, well, this is my concept. You're stealing my idea, or you're trying to do the same thing that I'm doing. But Professor Carse was so appreciative of this, because his just cause was to spread this message. And Simon Sinek's able to do that. And in turn, honestly, you guys, like, from the bottom of my heart, I do believe that every single person should read this book. It will change the way you look at life itself, not just work, not just, what it is that you're working on, but just your entire life and your mindset. You see things with so much more clarity, at least for me. Do you agree that?
I 100% agree. I think this book is not just for business people, not just for companies. It's for individuals as well, because it can help you. And
once you read this book and you understand finite versus infinite, why I love it and why I recommend it is that feeling of discomfort that you have will start to dissipate.
Yes.
And that goes along with our why and our just cause as well. We want to spread this happiness. It's just profoundly amazing once you can open open your mind to this concept. All right, guys, and that wraps up the Infinite Game with Eat, Read, Sleep. We're so thankful to have you guys here today. Thank you for being a part of our just cause. We've got so many great resources and references for you guys. We put up a lot of quick pocket references on our Instagram. So if you follow us on social, thank you. If not, go ahead and do so. We are also on TikTok. We've got Twitter. We've got YouTube Shorts. We're all over the place, you guys. Thank you again. Come back next week and we will see you soon.